Hey, what's up, everybody? We have a new YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe right now. Leave a comment on the video. Share it with your friends. It's also a podcast, 3 and Out, wherever you listen with me, John Middlekauff, Apple, Spotify. We have you covered, as well as thevolume.com. We have merch. Check out. I got 3 and Out hats right now. Thevolume.com. Search the podcast. Buy some merch. Okay, Middlekauff mailbag time. At John Middlekauff, Instagram, fire in those DMs. Start with Sean. In the beginning, you agreed with the Falcons drafting Michael Penix. Later, you felt it was not a good idea. What made you change your mind? Not sure I ever agreed that it was a good idea. I don't remember that take at all. I thought it was one of the most outrageous things in the history of the draft. Then, now, today. And I like Michael Penix. But to draft a quarterback who's ready-made when you just paid a guy $100 million, I'm sorry, it still makes no sense to me. Even though, like, I always understand the logic of thinking big picture and everything that goes along with it. But to draft Michael Penix, a 23, 24-year-old plug-and-play starter. Now, I don't know if he's going to be good or not, but he's not some project. While you just gave a guy $45 million a year and guaranteed him over $100 million is not very logical to me. And it's just kind of represents not everyone's on the same page. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. You know, the coaches fell in love with them because they get involved with the draft process later. The owner wanted it. Just not everyone's on the same page. And yeah, I really don't know what else to say besides I thought it was stupid. I mean, I really, and I like Michael Penix. Honestly, if you told me, would you rather have Cousins coming off an Achilles for the next 4 years or just take your chances with Michael Penix? I would just take my chance with Michael Penix, especially on a rookie contract. I really enjoyed watching you and Colin talk about the schedule. I did a little research and noticed the Niners have 4 games against teams coming off a bye. Kansas City off a bye week 7, Dallas off a bye week 8, Seattle off a bye week 11, and then the Bills off a bye week 13. And they get New England coming off a Thursday game, mini bye, week 4. I know they suck, but it's still extra rest prep time. If the league is always intentional with what they do, what do you make of that? It's a good question. I don't really have a theory on the league trying to screw the 49ers here. I think when you're trying to mix and match all these schedules, the 49ers are playing the most primetime games with like the Jets and the Chiefs. Sometimes you just get a little screwed. Now, the problem is with the teams, like you said, it's the Chiefs, the Cowboys, and the Bills. The Chiefs won the Super Bowl and beat the Niners. The Cowboys won 12 games, and the Bills won the division again and won a playoff. I mean, that's tough. Like you said, the Patriots, whatever. I don't give a shit. But that's a challenge. I don't think it was intentional. I just think you have some of this stuff. And I thought the Niners schedule opens up pretty easy. You're always, when a first place team, you're going to get first place opponents. And yeah, I mean, their AFC game is the Chiefs. They also play the AFC North, which is good because of the Lions and the Bears. The Lions and the Packers. And if the Bears are solid, like it's not an easy division to play. But I don't necessarily think there's any logic thought behind the league going, you know what? Let's really try to slow down this 49er operation and give them the Bills, the Chiefs, and the Cowboys off buys. You know what the league likes? Their television partners to be happy. Why? So they can get more money moving forward. And the 49ers, when they're good, draw enormous ratings. So I don't think there's any malicious intent. I just think sometimes it's the way the cookie crumbles. Love the show. Lifelong Cowboy fan living in New York City. I consider myself a realist, unlike 95% of Cowboy fans. The "we dem boys" thing drives me insane. Anyway, the Niners have Bang Bang Niner Gang. I like E40, but that also drives me nuts. But it is what it is. People like it. Have some fun. Anyway, I've seen a lot of talk about the Cowboys running back. situation. I honestly think they're in a better situation now than last year. People forget just how mediocre Tony Pollard was. There were plenty of instances where I thought Rico Dowdle was the better early down back. Is that your special teams guy from South Carolina? Also, the Cowboys were incapable of running the ball on goal line all season. I believe the Cowboys missed Zeke tremendously last year, not only for short yardage running, but his ability to pass protect. Honestly, a part of his game that does not get talked about. You know why? It's like defense in the NBA. All we talk about is catching passes and running the ball. Yet pass protection is literally protecting the highest paid guy on the team. And no one gives it any respect beside coaches and GMs. Fans don't give a shit. Hell, I complain about it. I'm like, why is this guy not playing? And then you do a little research, text a buddy in the league. They're like, yeah, you can't pass protect. Not only, honestly, a part of his game. Okay, this year with the question marks on the offensive line, it's even more important to have Zeke back there for this reason, and also be able to run the ball in short yardage situations. Yeah, I mean, Tony Pollard got his leg snapped in the playoff game, right? I think by Dre Greenlaw it would have been a hip drop tackle now. And he clearly was not only not the same guy last year, but I think it brought to light that some players, and this is not a knock on any guy in Tony Pollard's situation, are incredible second options. It's like this in life. Some guys are meant to be the COO or the number 3 guy in a company. Not everyone can lead the fucking thing. And he's not a lead back. He's an incredible extra guy. And he was awesome 2 years ago. I remember last year, I'm not a huge fantasy guy, but I listen to a fantasy podcast here and there just to get some nuggets to talk about on the pod. It felt like a lot of people were going to draft him number 1 overall. I mean, he was a guy in a lot of fantasy leagues that was going very, very high for a lot of money. And I think the problem with Zeke is his speed is greatly diminished. Now, high-end speed for a running back is very overrated. It's not needed. How often are running backs busting 50-yard runs? It's the least important attribute. The Adrian Petersons are an outlier. But you do need to have explosive characteristics in short areas. And when you watch Zeke, he looks like a slower back. But from a skill standpoint of reading the hole, catching the ball, he's a very skilled player. But when running backs' legs go, it's a problem. So if all you're signing this guy is for short yardage and pass protection because he can catch the ball out of the backfield, okay, it makes some sense. But who on a given game is going to carry the ball for 16 attempts, 18 attempts? Like, you do need that player on your roster, and I think that is unknown. Because Zeke, if you give him 16, 18 carries, like, what would you guess his yardage would be? 40 yards? You can be a winning player as long as you're in the right role later on in your career, which ideally Zeke will be in. But to me, the running back position, when you get a high-end guy, the elite players, obviously they make a huge difference. If you got kind of a random group, that and like guard and center is the easiest to find. You can pluck a guy off a practice squad. You can find a guy that gets cut. You can find that position. It's not like you're not going to find random edge rushers. You're not going to find random quarterbacks in training camp. You can find running backs. The NBA playoffs are heating up, and so is the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. With same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. Don't miss out as the NBA postseason winds down. And if you're new to DraftKings, you got to check this out. New customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code JOHN, that's code JOHN, for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Die Hard 12 here, aka Seattle fan. Any thoughts on Ted Nguyen's piece in The Athletic? Do you think Mike Macdonald can turn the Seahawks around and make them a legitimate contender in the NFC West against the Niners-Rams? If so, how long do you think it would take? In fact, how long does it typically take for players to adjust to the new coaching staff and schemes? It's a good question. anytime you get a coordinator who usually if you get a head job, you are a star coordinator. And Mike Macdonald was, as many called him in Baltimore, boy genius. Him and Ben Johnson were the two best non-head coach coordinators in the league last year. He was a badass. But being a head coach is dramatically different. And Seattle's defense the last couple of years has mainly been putrid. It hasn't been good. Now, they invested a lot in Jamal Adams, and that was a disaster. Their pass rush has not been nearly what it was. And they've invested a lot of picks on defense over the years, and it hasn't quite worked out. So you go, okay, could the defense be better? And we say that a lot of the time. But just because you were a great coordinator doesn't mean it immediately translates on. Sometimes it does, right? McVay did, LaFleur did, Kyle did. It happens a lot with offensive guys. But I think sometimes defensive guys, because they're spread more thin as a head coach, like obviously they're not going to look as good as Baltimore did last year, but we go, oh, they're going to be better. Well, maybe. It's not like Pete was the village idiot. Last time I checked, he was a Hall of Famer on defense. Like, he's a defensive coach. That's his baby. So I don't know. I like anyone with a brain like Mike Macdonald a lot. How could you not? But a lot of people are very bullish on Seattle. I got to see it first. And I say this over and over, and it sounds like I'm a hater. Guy's a great story. But Geno fucking Smith's your quarterback. I mean, the Niners have smoked him for about the last couple of years. Like, do you feel good about winning a big game with him against Stafford and McVay or Purdy and Kyle? Because I have a hard time seeing it. I think one thing they got to figure out big picture is the quarterback position. And, I mean, they trade for Sam Howell. I might see what we got in Sam Howell. And I'm not acting like Geno deserves to get benched or whatever. I'm not saying start Sam Howell week 1, but I think we've seen the ceiling on the team. Love the show. Listen every day. My question is, do you think the Packers should extend Jordan Love this year? After seeing Goff get $53 million, I am curious what the market value for a guy that has only played at an elite level for 8 games. I think he's one of the most fascinating guys in the NFL because if you're, I said this, I think yesterday on my schedule pod, if you're the Packers right now, you would put in front of them 3 years, $100 million, guarantee every penny, basically averaging out $33 million a year. But if you're Jordan Love, and I think it's safe to say at this point, you'd probably have some pretty good self-belief. You go, yeah, let's play this out. Let's see how this goes. And I've said over and over, if he plays like he continues to look like he did last year, giving him the Jared Goff contract wouldn't be that difficult. But I got to use like the first 8 games. If he's not going to sign a very, very team-friendly deal, which is still a lot of money, but relative to quarterbacks, I think if you're Jordan Love, you go, let's watch these first 8 games. And if he does it another 8 games, I wrote down their schedule yesterday. Obviously Philly, then the Colts, then a couple weeks the Rams, then the Texans, then the Lions. I mean, if he's looking like he did last year against these teams, then I would just break him off in the middle of the season. So I don't see why he would be inclined to do anything right now that wasn't for a huge number. And it doesn't make sense for the Packers to do it right now just because, like you said, it's only been 8 games at a really, really high level. Now, if he's going to play at that level, he's a very, very valuable commodity. I mean, very, very valuable. But my guess is they play it out a little bit. Huge fan of the pod. I wanted to hear your opinion on a recently article that dropped. I pasted the link below. The article discusses new reports that Bears quarterback room with Fields, Foles, and Andy Dalton was effing toxic as hell. Apparently, Justin wasn't open to being mentored by Foles, and the two couldn't stand one another. I wanted to get your opinion on how the seemingly high-character guy could have so many issues in the quarterback room. I don't know how the hell Nick Foles, I don't know how well you knew Nick Foles during your time with the Eagles, but I couldn't imagine Nick being a problem in the situation. Could you speak on how this report should be interpreted? I haven't read the article. I've heard people talking about it, and I've heard the main points. I would say this. You can be a high character, good person and view your situation as kind of getting screwed. Like, I don't necessarily blame him as a rookie when he gets drafted 11th overall and he comes in with Andy Dalton. He's trying to beat Andy Dalton out. And then the following year, or was Foles, was it Andy Dalton and then Foles the following year? Maybe Foles, did they overlap? Was it both those guys? I'm kind of confused on the timeline now. Like, that would have been his first year. He's trying to win the job. I I don't know. I don't put much stock into it. Also, when you're young as a rookie, you haven't heard any of that stuff the last couple of years. I think we all can be kind of know-it-alls, and egotistical is probably the wrong way to put it, but like, I know Foles won a Super Bowl, but it's not exactly like Peyton Manning or Tom Brady are telling him. He views himself as better than Nick Foles. We could argue if that's true or not, but like what you do at 21, 22 years old, if you're different at 25, like welcome to being a guy. We grow, we mature. That definitely wasn't a knock that Poles and Eberflus had on him. And one thing's pretty clear with Poles is he values character a lot. So I wouldn't put much into it. It's kind of irrelevant. And who cares? He's not your quarterback anymore. He's a backup for the Steelers. Like you got Caleb Williams. So I would listen. These jobs are so competitive. There is so much on the line. Think about your own situation if you work in an office setting. Not everyone likes each other. And if you're both going after similar deals or competing with other people in your industry, like not everyone is fucking kumbaya. Even if they're quote unquote on your team or work for the same company. It's kind of life. Right? Now, was it toxic because the organization was falling apart? Or was it toxic just because they wouldn't talk to each other? I think we'd be shocked with how often stuff like that happens. Like you don't just, unless you're Peyton Manning or Aaron Donald or Travis Kelce, you're not just guaranteed that I have to listen to what you're saying. Like I got to listen to my coach. But like just because you're another player that did something 6 years ago, sounds like, I mean, I'm basically defending Justin Fields, but if I'm Fields, I show up like I'm the guy who just got drafted really high. I'm ready to play. I'm not some third round pick. Like you don't want your third round pick looking like that, but Justin Fields is supposed to be like, oh yeah, Andy, I'll just sit behind you and soak it all in. Like I understand competitive. That doesn't bother me really at all. But at the end of the day, if you're a Bears fan, who cares? As a Texans fan, I'm very excited about year 2 with CJ. While I think they're going to be very good this year, I want to avoid getting overhyped about a deep playoff run. How far do you see the Texans making it with a second-year quarterback who could have a sophomore slump? I think the biggest key to your offseason was in that Ravens game, there was a major, major discrepancy in talent. Now, you guys had some injuries. So the Tank Dell had broke his leg or whatever. But the talent, as the second half went on, it wasn't a fair fight. Where this year, you add Hunter, you add a couple DBs early in the draft, you add Diggs. I think you go into this season hoping we just have more talent. So if the quarterback, if he goes into a sophomore slump, you might not win the division. But if he plays at a high level again, do we have the talent, the young coaching staff, to compete in the playoffs against the Chiefs, against the Ravens, against the Bills? Because last year you weren't going to win those games. It just wasn't going to happen. Like you wouldn't have beat Josh Allen, the Bills. You wouldn't have beat the Chiefs. You obviously didn't beat the Ravens. You couldn't have beaten those teams. This year, I think, hey, I don't have your, would you go win 10 games last year or 11? I think 10. We might win 10 or 11 games, like being the similar win-loss record, but we're going to be a better team. Clearly, there's some luck involved with health, but that to me is what matters. It's not as much getting overhyped. It's like, are we just better? Are we more impactful? Do we have more high-end guys? Can Daniil Hunter add something? And Will Anderson take a step? See, I look at it more young players, second year in the system. Can Hunter and can Will Anderson and CJ Stroud be even better? CJ really just needs to about be the same. But if Will Anderson is even more of an impact guy, you're like, okay, you're fucking playing. Let's roll. What time's game time? That's how I'd look at it. Follow up. Do you think NIL money will empower players to try and dictate where they end up in the NFL? I just think no one cares. Like, if I want to draft you, I'm going to draft you. What are you going to do? I guess it could, but unless you're the number one overall pick, no one really cares about your opinion. And let's face it, most players, the higher you get drafted, the more money you get. So to dictate where you go in the NFL, like, yeah, would I rather play for the Chiefs than the Panthers? Of course. But am I going to be like, I will not play for anybody but the Chiefs or the Ravens or the Niners? You'd be like, okay, we're going to draft you at third overall. And one, why would you pass up that type of money? So, no. It happens a lot in the NBA. Like, we're not giving you our medical information. We just refuse to play for you. And it feels a lot in the NBA. It's like, okay, yeah, we'll totally listen to you and we'll pass on the player. I just don't think anyone in the NFL gives a shit. The other thing is players in the NFL. Like, once you're in the NFL, people are like, who the hell is this guy? Because let's face it, half the first round bust, they ain't any good. So you'd be a marked man before you even got. Now, the Eli Mannings and the John Elways, like, that will happen again. But if you're not the number one overall player, if you're like the 10th best player in the draft and you're trying to dictate going somewhere else, one, you would cost yourself money. And two, like I said, I just don't think front offices care at all. What are you going to do? Not show up to OTAs? Not be a good guy? What are you going to do when my 3 Pro Bowlers on defense are like, why are you acting like this? So it's just not really tolerated. You know, that's why the NFL has a lot of parallels to life. You couldn't act like that, no matter how talented you are, some up and coming engineer out of, USC or highest grades out of Ohio State or Cal Berkeley's business school. You can't just walk into the company day one and be like, sit in the corner office and tell everyone to shut up. It's just not the way it works. It is the way it works in basketball. It's not the way it works in the NFL. And one resonates a little bit more with most people than the other.